Welcome to Team Building Cultures, the podcast designed to deliver tools and tips for improving team communication, collaboration, and fostering a culture where teams thrive. Now, here's your host, Beverly Hathorn, owner of Strategic HR Consultants.
Thank you so much for joining me for yet another episode of Team Building Cultures. Today, I am really excited to speak with Mr. Roy Osing. Roy is definitely a very successful business developer and leader. He already took a startup internet company to $1 billion in sales. He's the only author, entrepreneur, and executive leader who delivers practical and proven, that's key, practical and proven, audacious, unheard of ways to produce high-performing businesses and successful careers. Roy is a former president and CMO and entrepreneur with over 40 years of successful and unmatched executive leadership and experience in every aspect of business. He's a blogger, a content marketer, and a mentor to young professionals. As an accomplished business advisor, he is the author of the no-nonsense book, the seventh in his series, Be Different or Be Dead, with the Audacious Unheard of Ways. He took a startup to $1 billion in sales, and I'm really excited to speak with him today. Today, he's going to talk to us about how we can be successful in that manner and how we can grow to $1 billion in sales using his methods and his ways. So, Roy, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk to you and hear your tips and tricks and all your little golden nuggets.
Well, thank you very much, Beverly, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. So let's just jump right in. I, as well as the listeners, want to know, how do we build, develop, maintain teams that produce, are engaged, are effective to help our business grow to the levels that you've seen?
Yeah, so first, for at least, and this isn't a prescription necessarily, it's simply an advocation of a process that worked for me, and it may have varying degrees of success with others, but I think if you give it a whirl, you'll find that it's pretty effective. And first of all, for me, I had to start out with a strategy. I mean, team building without a strategy, it may make people happy, but what I wanted was engaged people and effective in terms of delivering to goals. So for me, we had to build a context within which teamwork made sense. And so we had a strategic game plan for the business that had a rapid growth rate. And so the objective, quite frankly, was to define what exactly we needed to do with teams in our organization in order to execute that strategy pristinely. Because at the end of the day, you can have a great strategy, but if you can't execute it, it's not worth a heck of a lot. So my philosophy is always just get it just about right, and then out execute everybody else in the marketplace, and typically you will win. So within this execution context, the question that I asked then is, well, all right, what do our teams have to look like? And what do we have to do in order to get the teams working together, get them engaged, and get them effective? And so I created a whole bunch of tools, and not just one. And that's the point I want to make to people. There's no one silver bullet in terms of developing and maintaining effective teams. It just isn't. There's a whole bunch of little things, at least, that worked really, really well for me. And I started out by saying, look, if we want teams executing well, then they have to have a clear definition of what's expected of them. I mean, there's a whole lot of dysfunction that goes on in an organization when people don't understand what their role is and they invent it themselves, and their definition of what's required may be different than somebody else's. So you get a whole bunch of dysfunction going on. So I created this concept called line of sight leadership. And what I meant by that is my role as a leader was to define precisely the role of every function and every person in the organization in terms of delivering and executing on the strategy we agreed to. I have to tell you, that was an arduous process, and most leaders don't do it for that reason. It's tough. You go to sales, you go to marketing, you go to all the functions in your organization and work with people to help define precisely the deliverables and the behaviors expected of them to actually execute the strategy. Okay, because without that context, you may have happy people, but they're not really effective in terms of delivering the results you want. And it starts out with that, right? So the line of sight piece was absolutely huge. And in that respect, I was really a translator. So my job, Beverly, quite frankly, was to translate the strategy we had in terms of execution end game objectives into what that meant for each and every person in the organization. Most leaders, in fact, I would dare say none, do that. And yet it is so critical to delivery of results and the formation of effective teams. It's just mind-blowing that it doesn't get more attention. I got about 10 things here, which I'm not going to go into, but I will mention one other thing. And that is, if you want effective teams, you cannot have a dirty inside. And so let me explain what I mean by that. I had a program called Cleanse the Inside of the Organization. And what that was all about is getting rid of the things that prevented people from doing their jobs. So once they understood what was expected of them, the next question I asked was, okay, do we have a climate and an environment within which they can easily develop and easily deliver to those goals? Because if there's crap, I call it cut the crap, or grunge in the organization relative to processes and procedures, et cetera, that get in the way, then clearly they're not going to be able to deliver. And the degree of employee engagement goes down because, quite frankly, they can't deliver, right? And so we spend a lot of time cleansing the internal environment, getting rid of the rules and the policies and the systems and the procedures that did not enable them to do their job. Those two things, line of sight and cleanse the inside, were absolutely huge in terms of unleashing the power of teams in the business and leading them and driving them and enabling them to deliver the kind of results that we wanted. So you have to start with context. You can't simply say, how do I get more effective teams? Because the next question is, well, what's the definition of more effective? In my world, the answer to that question is they have to be able to execute the strategy. If you can't execute the strategy, then what are we building teams for?
Awesome advice. And I am in complete alignment with you, especially when you talk about the dirty inside, or how did you phrase that? Yes, the dirty inside. When you talk about employee engagement and building teams or high performing teams, your culture needs to be suitable. You need to, as a plant mom, I like to call myself, because I like growing things. I grow things inside the house and outside. And I know that my soil that I plant my plants in needs to be conducive to their needs, not my needs, their needs. And I know that when I water them and when I give them sun, or where I place them in the yard or in the house, it needs to be conducive to what it takes to make them grow. So I like to say that an organization's culture is the soil in which all things grow. That's just my little tagline, if you will. And so I know that a dirty inside is not conducive to growth and development. And even worse, if you limit, if you have a culture of where there's no psychological safety, there's no autonomy, there's micromanaging, where if you have all of this in your culture, you can sometimes deflate an engaged, productive employee, and they go somewhere else, like to your competitor. But even worse, you can deflate that engaged employee to where they become disengaged and unproductive, and they stay. They don't go. They stay right there in your organization. So I'm in total alignment with you on that. Those are all very, very good nuggets, to hand to us. So what would you say is some of the things, the experiences that maybe you see as unproductive or obstacles, to your process, your line of sight leadership. I know that it might be difficult to go and find these objectives and to review all the jobs and all the different organizations, but what are some of the other things you would say are obstacles to that line of sight leadership?
Well, within the context of cleansing and getting rid of the grunge, one of the biggest things that actually enabled executing the growth strategy we had, and at the same time engaging employees better, was what I call killing dumb rules. It was a simple little concept. Okay, it simply says that a dumb rule is a rule or policy that doesn't really make any sense to a customer. They just don't understand it. It was created, looking inward, and you're forcing it on the customer. And essentially, it's a say no cultural kind of context, as opposed to a cultural say yes to customers, getting them leaning in. And so we had a lot of energy placed on seeking out and literally destroying the rules in our company that made no sense to customers. And the biggest source of that work was frontline people that were customer facing people, teams that were customer facing. So we enabled them, and they love this, by the way. You talk about getting frontline people engaged. When I asked them to identify the dumb rules, the things that customers didn't like, it didn't take them very long to give me a long list. Okay. And for anybody out there that doesn't think they have dumb rules in their organization, I suggest that you're not looking close enough. I mean, it's not a condemnation. It's just like, figure it out where you are and move on from there. It doesn't mean you're a bad organization. It just is what it is. So fix it and move on. So we had dumb rules committees, Beverly. We had dumb rules committees all over the operations of my organization, and their objective, and they were populated with frontline operations people. Okay, now this actually created a bit of angst for my management team, because I didn't ask them. I asked frontline people, frontline teams, tell me what is stupid in terms of policies that affect customers, because managers didn't know. They just kind of hallucinated what they thought. But frontline people working with us every day. So we had frontline committees, we had frontline contests, we had frontline dumb rules awards, etc. I would show up in the workplace with a long sleeve white T-shirt with dumb rules written on it with a big X through it on the front and the back of my T-shirt. And so it didn't take long for people to understand that, hey, we had a fun thing going on here, but never forget it was strategic, in a sense that making it easy for people to do their job with customers aided execution, which delivered strategic results. And I want to just re-emphasize that. Look, you're not trying to create great teams for the sake of doing it. You're creating great teams and engaged people to deliver the strategy of your organization. And if you have any other framework, it's the wrong framework. So things like dumb rules, cutting the crap, getting rid of the dirtiness was all strategic. It was fun, but at the end of the day, and it lit fires in people, got them interested. But at the end of the day, it drove superlative performance, leading to $1 billion. So if it's not directionally right in terms of growth, then you got to figure something else out. So that was one example of a simple little program, that just really, really worked. We got it cleaner inside. And how do we know that? Ask the frontline teams. Are you finding it easier to do your job these days? Yeah, Roy, we are. Or no, Roy, no, I got this other issue over here. We need to cleanse. And so we would go chase that. And so over time, the culture changed because we were much more frontline focused, and results improved because execution was better. And we got closer to the $1 billion. So that's kind of what we did.
That is crazy simple. That is just really, that is crazy simple. It's not rocket science, just get rid of the obstacles and the things that are blocking you. Now, my question would be, sometimes when we get rid of these dumb rules, when we snatch that little building block out of the middle over here, does it make something else tumble, i.e. upstream or downstream? Well, how does that affect their processes and systems? And then do you need to then go to those other organizations, did you include them in getting rid of these dumb rules? Was this a process that you guys all worked out together? Or did you, how did you go about doing that? And I'm sure, by the way, I'm sure the employees love that, because now they're a part of what's happening, which is what they really need. They don't need
Yeah.
to just feel they're another cog in the wheel. They need to feel a part of what's going on. But
Well,
yeah, how did you do that with the upstream and the downstream people?
yeah, and it's an excellent point, and for sure we didn't do it in any isolated way. I mean, essentially, to make this thing work, you have to look across the organization, right? It's not a silo activity; it's an organizational issue, and so the dumb rules committees that I described earlier were populated with people that had a part of the ownership in each of those rules, and so their
Ah,
collective objective was to fix it, either get rid of it. I said to look at two simple things: you get rid of it if you can, you change it if you have to, and you make it customer friendly if you can't get rid of it. Like there's some rules that are founded in regulations and legality kind of requirements. You can't get rid of them, but one of the things you can do is to make them more customer friendly. You can have a communications process around a stupid rule that doesn't make customers feel intimidated and worthless. And the reality is today, when you have somebody saying, well, you can't do that, Roy, because it's our policy, how does Roy feel? First of all, Roy feels like totally humiliated, and then he gets angry really fast. And then what he does is when he hangs up the phone or gets off his computer, he goes tells 75 of his good buddies how crummy you are. And they go, whoa, that's dumb. And they tell a bunch of their friends. And so the process thing was kind of it, and we held people accountable. Like it wasn't a matter of complaining about the rule. My view was, okay, fine, Beverly, you've identified a rule that we need to change. Okay, what are you going to do about it? Okay, you form a team across the organization, and you got 30 days to come back to me and tell me what you're going to do or what you did do with it. And I'm going to hold you accountable for achieving that objective. So, I mean, it was hardwired into performance plans. Key element. You can't let this stuff hang in limbo. You just can't. You got to drive it into performance plans, behavioral expectations, and hold people accountable. Otherwise, nothing happens. And the same with the management team. I mean, my management team, I held them accountable to make sure that the dumb rules committees got everything that they needed. Because if they didn't have the resources or the tools, it would be pretty difficult for me to expect them to deliver, right? So the definition of what management and leadership support was changed in that dumb rules environment, changed completely. And the other thing that changed was the culture, because we basically were moving, even though I didn't talk about it this way, we were moving from the traditional kind of a pyramid organizational philosophy into the inverted one without really talking about it that way. So the very fact that we started engaging frontline people and frontline leaders more and more and giving them more empowerment, giving them more autonomy, enabling them more, was really moving them up the status and the structure in the organization without really talking about inverting the pyramid, right? Like as soon as you start talking about that with people, they go, oh, their eyes glaze over and whatever. You don't have to talk about it. You just demonstrate the behaviors necessary to get you there. And that's what we did.
Yeah, that's, you talk about some of my favorite things, which are communication, collaboration, empowerment. Those are really great weapons and tools, whichever word you want to use. But, those are really great items to have on any team, even a team that's working fine. When you've empowered, especially when we're talking about our frontline people, because our frontline people are strapped and hindered by all these different processes and policies that they have to adhere to that, like you said, prevent them from delivering a level of service to a customer that they would probably prefer to deliver. Let's take some simple things like refunds. Sometime, there's so many hoops that our frontline people have to jump through to issue refunds or product returns or something like that. And it makes the frontline people feel powerless. Nobody trusts me to decide if this is a legitimate return or refund. It makes the customer feel like you don't trust them. What do you think? I'm trying to trick you, or I'm trying to, and then it takes up the first level leadership. It takes up a lot of their time to go through everything that they have to go through to process this return and approve the return. So, that's sometime a dumb rule. I feel like if you hired these people and you trained them and you vetted them before you hired them, why aren't you trusting them to do the right thing? So I think sometimes our dumb rules really get in the way, as you have mentioned. And, I'm glad to see that someone has a process to establish a team, a collaborative team across the board to say, okay, if you get rid of this dumb rule, then that hits my rule. And well, maybe I can change my rule because it's not a dumb rule, it's a necessary rule, but maybe I can, flip it to work better with what you're trying to do. And that collaboration is so powerful. I'm really glad that somebody, is coming forth with such a plan, such an audacious plan. So how did you come up with that term, audacious? I mean, it's not a word that you invented, of course, but how did you come up with that? And, what was the innovation behind you being able to get everybody else to act audaciously? Because you're asking everybody, let's all be audacious. There's some people who are like, well, wait a minute now, I don't know, we want to do all this. So how did you get everybody to be audacious?
Well, I don't know that you can. Okay. And certainly my goal in work and in life is not to try and convert people to the way I think, but to show them the benefits of doing things differently. My brand is be different or be dead. I've been on this journey ever since I was a kid. Okay. And what I mean by that was I always was driven to look for different ways of doing things that people cared about. And I want to make that point. This isn't about doing things differently for the sake of being different. This isn't about your DNA. This is not about your sexual preferences. It's not about the color of your hair or the color of your shoes. It's about when people care about something, the ability to create a unique approach or a unique solution that only you provide into that need set. That's the whole be different thing. And I've been driven by that my whole life. What it means, though, is you have to step out, okay, of the box. You have to create a new box. You have to break away from tradition. You have to be audacious. If you want to go on this journey, you can't do it by wanting the comfort of the herd. You can't do it by not wanting to take a risk. You can't do it by getting in by avoiding conflict. You can't do it by being invisible. Okay. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to do this. What I'm saying is, if you choose, okay, that philosophy makes sense for you, then the word audacious and everything that it means in terms of courage and being brave, right, and not being afraid to take criticism, all of that stuff is bundled into the word, and that's what you need. And certainly when I was fortunate enough to be asked to be the president of this relatively new company, the only way, but it was sitting in a telco environment, okay, in the days just coming out of monopoly. So you can just imagine what the culture of that business was. It was voice oriented. It was union oriented. It was order taking oriented. It wasn't marketing and competitive driven, right? It was a whole lot of other things. The only way to make an impact on that culture was to break away from stuff, right, in a polite, dignified way, honoring the past, but saying, okay, that was then, we need to move on. And the only way to do that is through courage and being brave and not being afraid to take it on the chin. I mean, and to have, this is when I learned that pain was a strategic concept, okay? I mean, the pain threshold you have to have in a world that requires audacity is huge. It's way up here. And if you don't have it, forget it. You can't make it. And I know what that sounds like. Like, what do you mean, Roy? Pain. Look at, when you're the only one advocating something, you know it's painful to move even a nano inch forward, right? And so I would say yeah, audacious. I mean, yeah, I actually stumbled on that word when I was writing my last book. And when I hit on it, I goes, oh my God, that's me. That is absolutely the right word to describe what people need to have in order to go on this be different journey, which, by the way, we need as a society. We need to be creative. We need to be innovative. We need to create new boxes to play in. We can't follow the herd. Well, that requires audacity. And so the benefits of this aren't just book sales, because I could care less about that. I mean, that's not what I'm in this for. I'm in this to change the conversation in the world away from traditional stuff, which yesterday may have been relevant, but today it might not be relevant. Put the textbook down, try some simple stuff that lights fires in people, and that requires you to be audacious. And if you can't do that, that's fine, but don't expect doing the same things and getting different results will ever happen, because it won't. So, yeah.
And that's the definition of insanity. So
It certainly is.
yeah. So you talk about your brand, which is Be Different or Be Dead, and being audacious. And you mentioned earlier that you kind of captured that earlier in life. What happened to kind of let you know that, this is who, this is going to be my brand. This is what I'm going to push forward with. And how do we establish how do we go about understanding our brand and building that brand? So how'd you come up with that? What happened?
Well, yeah, I never came up with it until I looked back upon it and said, well, what was I really doing? What was I really believing in? I mean, I always behaved that way, as I said. I mean, I would always have a lens. How am I going to do this differently? How am I going to stand out in a way that mattered as I was given a particular challenge? So that was just kind of like the way Roy approached problems and challenges. It was just sort of an inherent part of me, and it was running through my veins, and it was part of my DNA. I think I actually got it from my mom. Okay, my mother was a hard driving woman that knew exactly what she wanted, and very little could stand in her way of achieving what she wanted. So I'm pretty sure that I got my mom sitting in there, behind my heart, pushing me on this stuff, right, without really knowing it. And so as I went through and went into business and started to think about the be different, or this drive that I had to do things differently, start to think about that in a business context. Okay, what I realized was the world is all about differentiation. To be successful in business, you have to be different. Mm-hmm. Hence, if you're not different, you're dead or soon will be, which ends up to be part of my tagline. But be different or be dead has an extremely important business context. I mean, some people don't like the language, and I don't apologize for it, because the consequences of businesses dying are severe. People lose their jobs, they lose their livelihood, investors lose their money. And that the world is replete with examples of businesses dying because they haven't been able to differentiate themselves. Okay, they're the same as everybody else. I mean, look at the blockbusters of the world, and I mean, you could go on and on and on and on. And so my sort of desire around being different, without yet calling it that, started to take on a business context. And when I sort of thought about it from the point of view of well, how do I tag this thing? That's when I started to sort of realize that it's really about separation and being different in a way that people care about, not for the sake of just being different. And I know I keep saying that, but too many people run away after a conversation like this and say, well, I want to be different and change the color of my hair. You can do that, but that's not what I'm talking about. Okay. And so I tagged Be Different or Be Dead. Years later, when I actually left this internet company, and I was starting to do presentations for small businesses and chambers of commerce around business growth and business strategy. And the piece that people loved was the piece around differentiation. And I started to use Be Different or Be Dead in that context. And so it was born. People were just like, wow, that's kind of an insane way to talk about differentiation, Roy, but let's have a conversation. So I realized that it grabbed people. And so that's what brands have to do. They need content. They need strategic relevance, which this has, and it needs to have a personality, which it has. And so the brand started to grow, and so the 7 books that I've written are around that theme. Everything I talk about is around that theme. All 75 podcasts that I've done is around that theme. My life is around that thing. As a grandfather, it's around that theme, be different or be dead. And so if you don't live it, that's the other point, like it's not an academic thing here. It's not an intellectual journey. It's it's an emotional journey. And so you've got to treat it that way and just let it live. It's organic. Just let it live and let it grow with you and change it depending on where you are in your life and so forth, and reap the rewards, because it's wonderful. It's a wonderful spot to be in. It really is.
Yeah, I can see. And that's wonderful advice for building our brand. That, it's it's inherent in us already. You just gotta name it and tag it. And then once you give it a place, it becomes a thing that you kind of can grow around and you can build around. So that's wonderful. And I really like the differentiator of being audacious. And I think we probably need to do more of that instead of just following the norm and being like little. If you've ever played video games back in the day, there were these little things called limerings, and they would follow each other. And then if the one up front fell off the cliff, they
Yeah.
all fell off the cliff because nobody said, "Hey, there's a cliff up there." So yeah.
But
So
here's the deal. Here's the deal. We've been taught to not do that. We've been taught to
yes,
comply. We've been taught
yes.
to conform. Okay. So people find it understandably really difficult to break away from the momentum of the past. And I do a lot of speaking on education systems. Okay. And the biggest theme that I'm always hitting on, consistent with Be Different or Be Dead, is the need to put the textbook down. Okay, what got you here will not get you where you need to go. Okay, what got you here is valuable, and I don't denigrate education, obviously, but you need to understand that inherently it wants you to conform to a set of formulas, to a set of algorithms, to a set of predictive equations. Like, I got a math degree, okay? I've never solved a business problem using a differential equation, Beverly. I never have, right? And yet, I mean, people come to me and say, well, how do I do this? And this, the book says, and I say, come on, let's put the textbook down for a minute and let's have a conversation about what we can do to light fires in people in the real world, given their realities. Okay, that's not in the textbook, except for Roy's textbook. That's the new textbook. But it's true. And I don't blame people. They've been taught not to step out. And so how can you expect a person coming out of school, a high school, to be really leaning into risk-taking and non-compliance? You can't. So we got to move them. And hopefully conversations like this, Beverly, will help, make it easier for people to feel more comfortable with that. It's okay to be different. It's okay to stand out. It's okay to seek visibility. I mean, I keep saying, look, if the only one that knows you're great is your mom, you're in trouble. Okay. You need to figure out a way, from a personal point of view, how to actually get noticed, because you're doing something creative and wonderful for what people care about. And yet that's uncomfortable for a lot of people. I created my solution to this whole differentiation thing is what I call the only statement. I created this because I needed a tool to differentiate. Like when organizations talk about their competitive advantage, what do they normally say? Well, they say things like, and I call this claptrap. They say things like, we're better, we're number one, we're the market leader, we're blah, 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 right? Which means absolutely nothing to a customer. What they want to know is, why should I buy from you as opposed to your competition? But the problem is the world of differentiation these days doesn't answer that question. So I had to figure out my own tool. It's called the only statement. It goes like this. We are the only ones who. Not we're the best, we're the better. And let me give you an example of that, because I've actually got an only statement for Roy, right? Because this applies to people as well as organizations. So Roy's only statement says, Roy is the only author, entrepreneur, and executive leader who delivers practical and proven audacious, unheard of ways, because nobody else talks about them, to build high-performing businesses and successful careers. Roy isn't better at anything. He's the only one that does this. That's the way to cut through the clutter of differentiation these days. And so part of my journey is to teach this tool because it's really simple to do. I mean, it really is. And it's highly impactful in terms of individuals, in terms of their career and life choices, and organizations. And I work with business leaders all the time on this to address the differentiation challenge. And it really works. So check it out. The only statement, only. Gotcha. Roy offers the only.
Gotcha. And I did read that for our listeners in your introduction. So yeah, this has been some great information, Roy, and thank you so much for delivering to us today. So for those who want to learn a little bit more about you or chat further with you, how can our listeners reach you, and give us the name of your book again and tell us where we can purchase your book?
Sure. I've got a website. It's called surprise, be different or be dead.com. And so you can visit me there. I've got pages as it relates to blogs. I blog every week on my content. And Beverly, I've been blogging since 2009, which is the time I wrote my first book called The Business Survival Guide, Be Different or Be Dead, Your Business Survival Guide. So there's lots of content there on my stuff. I got a page on the 7 books that I've written around the whole concept of Be Different or Be Dead, including the latest one, Audacious Unheard-of Ways that took a startup to $1 billion in sales. And there's many pages in there on what other people are saying about the work and about how it applied to them. And I'm doing a ton of podcasting, and thank you again for having me on. So there's a page in there that kind of takes you there. And the last thing is I have an email address at roy.osing@gmail.com, and I'm happy as heck to communicate one-on-one with people who are interested in learning more, who have questions about it. I mean, I, on a daily basis, get emails from people saying, hey, Roy, how about check out my draft only statement? What do you think? And hey, that's wonderful. I love that. It just tells me that people are thinking about it and they want to be engaged in it. So I'm here, so use me.
Wonderful. And we will put that information, that contact information, in our marketing materials. So this has been a really great conversation. So I say to my listeners, go out there, be audacious. Don't be afraid to break away from the norm. This is where your creativity and your innovation come in. So go out there and be audacious. Get yourself a brand and develop that and build that. If you want to build and create effective teams, you got to get rid of the clutter. Get rid of the clutter and get a clear vision and get your teams involved in what's going on. So this has all been really great stuff that Roy provided us today. And if you want to learn more about team building and the cultures that you need to create, or if you have HR needs, be sure to visit me at customermeasures.com. Strategic HR consultants, or you can contact me via email at beverly@customermeasures.com. So this is Beverly Hathorn, your host for today of Team Building Cultures. And thank you so much for listening, all. Thanks, Roy.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Team Building Cultures. We hope we have delivered helpful and enlightening information to help you create your dream team. Join us next time.